Good evening, everyone. My name is Benga Gunjimi. I'm the Executive Director of the Nigerian Center. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight on this very important Know Your Right workshops that is very timely. We are in unprecedented times, and we thought this event is very important, and we thank the partners and the elected officials that have partnered with us to make this a reality. So what I want to do quickly is to go through what we have as an agenda today. Shortly, we are going to be hearing a message from Congressman Ivey of Maryland, and we'll also be listening to Mr. Luis Murillo from his office to talk to us about general opportunities they have at that office for immigrants populations. We will be hearing from Council Member Wala Blegay, uh, PG County Public School System, our own DC representative, Dr. Oye Owelewa, and then we'll turn it over to our experts at clinic at the Nigerian Center to proceed with the Know Your Right workshop. So, and after that, we're going to open it up for Q&A. So if you have question and answer, I would say you can please hold it to the Q&A section. If you want to chat it as well, the lawyers will be able to see, or the speakers will be able to respond to it as well. But we would have a dedicated time for Q&A. Shortly, I want to play a short video about the Nigerian Center work for those of us who are just joining Nigerian Center for the very first time. My name is Benga Gunjimi, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Nigerian Center. The Nigerian Center is the very first Nigerian American immigrant and community center. While we are called the Nigerian Center, we serve all minority and all immigrant groups in the United States. In many immigrant communities across the country and around the world, whether they're Chinese or Jewish or Latinos or even Ethiopians, there is an actual location members of those communities can walk into to support the American dream and American experience. While the Nigerian community individually has prospered, we now have an opportunity as a community to have our own Nigerian Center.
I am most excited to be a part of the Nigerian Center because we are a resource hub. And we know that while a lot of Nigerians we may know come into the country and they have a connection here or there is a huge population that don't have access. I can speak to thinking about maybe 30, 40 years ago when my parents came to the country. And while my dad came to the country through education, my mom came through a lottery. And when she got here, she had to go do things the regular way. You know, she came in New York, hustled, worked for McDonald's for like 2 weeks. And from McDonald's, she started getting, other menial jobs before she was able to meet my dad. They got married, they had children. My mom didn't go back to school until she was like 40 to finally start her career. And I know that if there was something like the Nigerian Center, she could have been afforded opportunities, access information on how to go to school or how to start her own business if that's what she wanted to venture into.
I remember my uncle, I think I was like 10. He got deported. I haven't seen him in years because he can't come back in this country. If he had had the resources that the Nigerian Center offered, it would be a different story.
As a pastor, and I can speak confidently for the church community, a lot of pastors struggle with the kinds of immigration challenges that their members are having. And sometimes when we pastors meet, we joke about the fact that there's this thing that is, the don't ask, don't tell kind of thing, principle that most Nigerians are engaging in. They don't tell you what they are going through. Some of them are dying in silence. By the time they speak up, sometimes it's too late. And I know that as a pastor, I could have, the Nigerian Center will have come handy in helping people to know what is right, having the kind of the right information, speak to the right attorney, have right representation in court, and just to make the journey easier and smoother in the United States.
People come here from different paths and for the same main reason, just to get a better life, a better situation for their family. So there are numerous ways, there are numerous paths to the United States and to citizenship. So we help people with family-based immigration, employment-based immigration, asylum, refugee cases, student visas, pretty much everything that the law allows us to assist people with with the process of immigration.
Just having this center here, is just people identified that looks just like us, who we can get the resource from. I mean, this is something that even me as a grown-up young person just wanted to come. I wanted to know that it belongs here. I'm just happy that this is here. I wish that my mom and dad, they were still alive to witness this experience.
From the time my parents came from Kenya, they immigrated to New Jersey, and that's where they actually met. It took years for my mom to find employment. My dad has stayed at the same job for 25 plus years in fear of not being able to find other employment. Not even that, being able to purchase a home, it took them 25 years to buy their dream home. Having the healthcare aspect and having health insurance for my siblings and I. Nigerian Center is providing a service from all crosses across the board for immigrants.
And Nigerian Center provides opportunities with immigration and naturalization, provide home ownership opportunities, access to capital, language classes, and cultural programs.
Learning about the Nigerian Center was a godsend. Growing up, I used to think about how we can share our experiences and our culture. And oftentimes, Nigerian people are so interested in giving back, but there are few opportunities and motives to do so. So when I heard about the Nigerian Center, it just clicked. We're talking about home ownership. We're talking about financial literacy. We're talking about immigration services, not only for people from our background diaspora, but for everybody else as well who can gain from it. I see the Nigerian Center not only as an opportunity to celebrate our culture, but to also share it as well.
I welcome you to be a part of the journey and to be a part of the experience. Welcome to the Nigerian Center. Okay, thank you very much for that. I just want to quickly do some muting here. Give me one second. Okay, there we go. Okay, I want to quickly highlight upcoming opportunities we have. February 8th, this Saturday. If you want to learn more about the Nigerian Center work, particularly our community partners, please go to our event page and register for the event and learn how you can be a part of the Nigerian Center's work. Every Thursday, we have a walk-in immigration clinic in Washington, D.C. From 12:30 to 4:30. If you are in Washington, D.C. or in the DMV area, you can walk in at any time to meet with our immigration attorneys on all the categories of immigration that you heard on the call. For those who are outside of the DMV area, you are able to do a virtual option. However, that comes with a small fee, and there are a few waivers that are available as well. Volunteer opportunities exist at the Nigerian Center. Please go to Nigerian Center /serve. Community partners, as I mentioned, through which we amplify impact in the community. You can join us whether you are a nonprofit, faith-based, business, media, governments. It's open to anyone to want to uplift immigrant justice work. If you're not following us on social media, please ask that you do so. You can follow us using the handle on the screen, Nigerian Center, or the Nigerian Center on Facebook, Twitter, or now X, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. I should mention we do have a Know Your Right YouTube playlist that covers all the categories of immigration, whether it be employment-based, humanitarian-based, family-based, um, work authorizations, all of that. There are videos, including this one. They are also available on our YouTube page. This is one time that we highly uh, ask for your support financially if possible. And the best way to support Nigerian Center is to be a recurring donor of any amount. We do need support more than ever to be able to continue important work like this that we do. The link to do so is on the screen, nigeriancenter.org/donate. Okay, that said, I'm going to play a short pre-recorded video from Congressman Ivey, and I'll turn it to Mr. Luis to talk more about opportunities at that office.
Hi, I'm Congressman Glenn Ivey. I'm sorry I can't be here with you tonight, but I have a conflict and that's unavoidable. But I've got my staff here to help and provide any assistance that you need and answer any questions that you might have as we go through this forum tonight. This is going to answer critical questions for you that come at a critical time. The Trump administration has launched attacks on the rights of people who are here as immigrants. We want to make sure we do everything we can to protect those rights and make sure that you know what your rights are. So I want to thank Councilmember Blegay for pulling this together, the Nigerian Center, and the Catholic Legal Immigration Network for the work that they're doing on this. Wish you the best this evening, and as always, if there's anything my office can do to help out.
Thanks, Jay. See you okay?
I'm going to ask you please mute yourselves. That would be great. I'm going to ask.
You okay? All right.
Okay. Mr. Luis, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you if you are here. Are you here, Mr. Luis?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And thank you so much.
Excellent. Excellent.
Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to participate in this very important event. So big shout out to the Nigerian Center and also to Councilwoman Blegay for giving us this opportunity. So as the Congressman said, even though he's there in DC fighting for us, he has an entire district office in Prince George's County dedicated to constituent services. So if you're ever dealing with the federal government, please get our office involved and we gladly assist you in that process. But today we're going to talk about specifically immigration, which deals with the State Department and the Department of Homeland Security. And under those departments, you have ICE, USCIS, and all the immigration enforcement agencies. So there has been a crackdown on immigration, but immigration is not illegal. So if you or somebody you know is having an immigration process, whether it's getting a visa abroad or trying to get that appointment for a visa abroad, please let us know, and we'll gladly assist you in securing that appointment for the visa or just assist you in that visa process. We have direct lines to all the embassies, so it doesn't matter in which country the consulate or the embassy is in, we have direct line to them. So if you have a family member going through immigration process abroad, please let us know and we'll get involved. But particular on the immigration crackdown that we're seeing from the Trump administration, is complicated. On the chat, I would drop right now several privacy release forms. So, for example, when you want us to reach out to a federal agency, whether it be a consulate, embassy, USCIS, the congressman has the privacy release form that you fill out, and it's a legal document that gives us consent to reach out on your behalf. For deportations, it's a different process, right? So ICE has its own privacy release form that's just not for a congressional office, but just third-party members. So lawyers have access to this privacy release form, family members, and of course your congressional representation. For that one, I also dropped on the chat. You fill it out, and that also was give us the consent to reach out to ICE on your behalf. Now, we cannot guarantee any outcome, but we can guarantee the response. So through the legal immigration process, we can't tell the embassy how to make their decisions, but we could tell them to explain why they made a certain decision. And as far as deportations, we can't guarantee that your loved one will not get deported, but we could locate them. That's one thing that we could guarantee. So if tomorrow you wake up, God forbid, and somebody you close to you is under ICE custody, we could locate them. And even though this privacy release form is just for all third parties, right? ICE has a specific office that their job is to deal with congressional offices. So compared to a lawyer, for example, we could probably get a response quicker. So if you're trying to identify or locate a family member, most likely or not, we could get that response much quicker. But I also dropped on the chat our phone number. If you have any questions or want to talk in a more private setting, please call us. I also dropped the emails of the Congressman immigration staffers, which my emails included. And if you ever have any doubts, any questions, maybe not today, but tomorrow, next month, please feel free to reach out to us. Please feel free to get us involved. And we do not ask for any legal status. As long as you live in Prince George's County and you're dealing with the federal government, you get the same treatment as any U.S. citizen or any U.S. resident. We do not ask for legal status. What we're trying to do is just trying to reduce the problems that you're having with the federal government. So with that being said, I'll stick around for the Q&A part. But thank you again very much, Councilwoman and Nigerian Center, for giving us opportunity to share our resources.
And one quick question, sir, before you leave. Is this process the same in other counties and other districts across the country for those who may not come from Prince George's County?
Yes, yes. So every office does a little bit different, but overall it's the same process. As far as you need to fill out a privacy release form from your congressional member. And the ICE one is, yes, throughout the whole country. And even though you don't live in Prince George's County, for example, still call us and we'll connect you with your congressional member, right? So sometimes you don't know who your member is because of redistricting and things like that. And if you're not in our district, we'll gladly assist you. And the councilwoman knows Prince George's County is divided into two, right? So a lot of times we get a lot of inquiries as part of Congressman Hoyer's office. But what we do is we gladly connect them with Hoyer's office. Same thing happens a lot with our Montgomery County friends, and we connect them to Raskin or whoever the congressional member are. So even if you don't know who's your member of Congress, feel free to reach out to us, and we redirect you to the correct resources.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, at this moment, just want to bring on Council Member Blegay. First, I want to just thank you for your leadership.
No problem.
How you move mountains in record time for this to happen. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for having us. And I want to thank you so much because we were planning on doing these in-person events over time, but we realize now that this is like immediacy and frankly, in person might not be safe. I just want to introduce myself to everyone. I'm Councilwoman Blegay on the Prince George's County Council. We are going to be diligent in my office in collaboration. The county council in itself and the county does not provide direct services for immigration in itself. But what we do is connect people with resources that do. So one of the things that we do, I just want to make sure that people understand, right now, if you have a pending status of sort, as you know, that's why we got the Congressman Ivey's office on here, because what we will do, we do think that you need to know the status first. And it's my understanding that they've taken away the access to be able to check online. So many people are kind of in limbo right now. So what we're doing is connecting people with your congressional offices. For Prince George's County, our two congressional offices are Congressman Ivey, which is Congressional District 4, and Congressional District 5, which is Hoyer. We do also have connections with other congressional offices, but for the county, we are connecting people with those. So if you contact our office, one of the first things we will do is connect you with your congressional representative so you can get the status. If you need a lawyer, Nigerian Center also provides lawyers, but we do want to work with a network we do depend on Nigerian Center, CASA, some other organizations that have access to lawyers that can help you also if it's more than just checking the status, because that's really what the congressional offices do. If you want to know what happened to my pending application for asylum,
curriculum, those type of things. We use the congressional offices for that. As for what we are required to do by law in the county, we do not, according to the law, and this is state law, and we have a guidance that we've received from the Attorney General, Anthony Brown's office. And next time we'll bring Anthony Brown's office on because they've been very helpful. We are only required to do what's by law, and those are only, ICE has their own authority and they can do their own thing with their administrative, but they do not have the right to direct our county agencies and offices to administer ICE warrants. So and I did bring our my District 6, actually, also District 6 school board member Brandon Jackson, who is also chair of the school board, but he's actually going to read the policy to you, because that policy is important for everyone to know that if you take your kids to school, the school system will not just turn you over to ICE. Do not believe any of the rumors. We've heard all types of rumors that ICE agents have gone into the school system. They have not. They've been close to the school system, but not within our school system. So for our police have been clear that they are only working on the warrants for their own criminal cases, which they are required to do, but nothing else. So just be careful. Know that our county resources will not be put forth into acting on behalf of ICE. We do not do that. But what we will say at this point is that it's good to get status, and make sure if you don't know your status, you get a lawyer or congressional office to check in. We also have Community Legal Services has guardianship support that they're providing for immigration, for those that need to make sure that they can do guardianship for their kids, making sure that they set everything in place. So we are going to have them come out and do something. So what I will advise people to do is, and my staff is going to, I am actually at an event right now. My staff is going to put, I'm putting my staff is going to actually put in the chat, and when I get off, the contact information from my office. If you are concerned about anything, just reach out to our office and we will direct you to the resources that we have. We have worked with a lot of nonprofits. In fact, last year we did a clinic where we brought all the nonprofits in to provide service. Even when it comes to mental health, we have support for that. In our healthcare system, we are working on a bill now for those who do not have status to get healthcare. You can still go to our federally qualified healthcare centers to get care if you need it. Our hospitals and even federal qualified healthcare centers will not report you or work with ICE. So you are safe in that space. But if we will provide my information, and let us know if you have any direct questions, and we would try to connect you with the resources that we have. But thank you so much to Nigerian Center for doing this. We will be working with Nigerian Centers others to do these monthly in different communities so that people will feel safe. So thank you, Benga, for your great work and your leadership.
Thank you very much, Council Member. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Brandon Jackson.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hello. So first I want to say thank you all for allowing me to be here today. I'm on double duty, have another Zoom call. This is a hot topic and it's another community looking at that. But first I want to just say I stand in solidarity with the immigrant community of Prince George's County and the United States as a whole, and the Board of Education as well. So there's a lot of miseducation going around. And I think sometimes we just need to, as leaders, to step up in our community and just explain and give people the real authentic information so we can equip ourselves with the education in order to know our rights and equip us with tools in order to fight back. So one of the things I do want to say is that Councilmember Blegay had hit on it earlier today, that we have been in conversations with ICE. Our superintendent, Millard House, has been proactive and a leader in this space. He's reached out to ICE, at least in the state of Maryland, and from our understanding that they do not have a focus on targeting schools. So that was reassuring to hear. But as we know that this political landscape is very fluid and it's changing. But as of today, that's not the case. And so as we get more information from the federal government, we definitely will keep everyone posted. I do want to say that ICE is to piggyback off of what Councilmember Blegay said, ICE is not allowed to enter our schools. They're only three special exceptions or conditions in which they can enter our schools, and I would like to share those things with you. The first is if they have a judicial warrant. ICE must have a valid judicial warrant or court order allowing them to conduct enforcement on our school grounds. Number two is if there are exigent circumstances, if there is a public safety concern, such as an immediate threat to life, property, ICE may take enforcement action. And then three is if they have permission from a designated official. In rare cases, ICE may request permission from school authorities for specific actions. And there are some legal protections that are offered to families. And these legal protections, one that I just want to bring up is the FERPA Act, which stands for the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. Schools are prohibited from sharing student information, including immigration status, with ICE without parental consent or a subpoena. So, as the school officials or leader of PGCPS, we have 130+ thousand students from all different backgrounds, ethnicities, races, wisdom, tradition, socioeconomics, all the above. So we will not be sharing any information with any other agencies in regards to our students without our parents' permission. So I just want you to know that as a school board, we're working together to make sure we protect our students. We're actually calling an emergency meeting for Friday at 5 o'clock to issue a school board resolution that's going to affirm our position and keeping our schools safe, making sure that there's safe zones. We already struggle with chronic absenteeism without the executive orders being what they are. So a lot of our immigrant communities, students, the parents are afraid to let their students go to school. So that has a trickle effect on kids retaining education. Graduation scores may not be as high. People not being able to conduct themselves and elevate the way they can without having that constant wraparound services that the schools offer by them not being there. So we just want to make sure that we underscore everybody's sentiment tonight. Just say we stand in solidarity with the immigrant community, and we're here to support and looking forward to engaging on Friday. If you all can tune in on Friday as we issue this resolution. Also, we will have a Know Your Rights forum right afterwards. We'll have our legal team to kind of talk through some of the different protocols and procedures when it comes to engaging PGCPS and just equipping our constituents with more information, law, and education to defend themselves in this space. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brandon. Um, and I believe that this particular process you laid down is kind of similar in other counties as well. Or is it?
Absolutely. This is throughout the whole entire country. These are federal laws that give us protection, the FERPA Act and things of that nature. So yeah, definitely. It's throughout the entire country.
Excellent. Thank you very much, sir.
No problem.
At this moment, I'm going to turn it to Elnora Bassey, policy attorney at Clinic. Thank you so much for co-hosting this wonderful event. So you may be able to share your screen if you have PowerPoints, and if not, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I do have a PowerPoint, so just give me a minute. And I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. I have a lot of screens up, so. Can you guys see the PowerPoint slide?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Now let me just pull up my notes here. Okay, I think we are good to go. So first and foremost, my name is Elnora Bassey. I am a policy attorney, federal policy attorney with the Catholic Legal Immigration Network. For those of you who may not be familiar with Catholic Legal Immigration Network, we're also known as Clinic for short. We are an organization that serves as a resource hub for over 400 affiliate legal service providers in the state and local communities. So those organizations look to Clinic for information, up-to-date information on immigration, all things happening in the immigration world on the federal and the state and local level. So we are so happy to be a part of this event this evening. It's very important that we get information out to the communities on knowing their rights, but also first and foremost, before we even get to the know your rights portion, it's important to discuss how these rules, how these policies even come about. And I'm going to focus a little bit today on the policy portion, the executive orders on Trump's first day. I can't even say first week, because on day one, he really came in blazing with over, I think, or close to 100 executive orders. So what I'm going to do is just provide a brief overview on some of the executive orders that impact immigration. There's about 11 that I'm going to go through, and I know that we don't have a lot of time this evening, so I'm going to go through them fairly quickly, but I will make sure to share my slides with the Nigerian Center so that they can get these slides to all of you who are on the call today. It's important because they have links that you can go to get more detailed information on the executive orders, and you can also learn a little bit more about Clinic and what we do. So I'm just going to dive right in. During the first week of President Trump's second term, he signed dozens of executive orders, and at least 12 of them are directly related to immigration. And these particular executive orders essentially are designed to provoke hatred towards the immigrants and stir up fear in the immigrant communities. And so the Trump administration intends to use these executive orders to fulfill some of Trump's campaign promises, which include closing the border, expedited removals, increasing detention of immigrants, and mass deportation. So what is an executive order? An executive order is a document that's issued by the President of the United States. And the President can implement these executive orders without reaching out to Congress for his or her approval. However, what's important to note is that the President does not have the authority to override or go against what existing laws currently exist or what has been established in our United States Constitution. And you will learn throughout this program, and just if you do your research on your own, you'll learn that some of the executive orders that he has implemented in Trump 1.0, as well as this second term, are actually in violation of the US Constitution and or are unlawful. And so it's important that we share the details of the executive orders today and where we are now and the impacts that they're going to have on the immigrant communities. And it's also important to know what he can and cannot do. So executive orders also instruct the federal government agencies such as Department of Homeland Security, Customs, Border and Patrol, the USCIS agencies to do or not to do something specific, or to get them to change their policies. And so it's important that we fight back on these executive orders because they have the authority to mandate federal agencies to create new policies and procedures to further the goals of the administration. And essentially, Trump is just doing what he wants to do, regardless of whether it impacts or damages communities, regardless of the fear it's going to incite, regardless of the misinformation. So it's important to stay informed on these orders and get involved in your local communities when you're able to do so. So the first one I want to just discuss very briefly is titled The Initial Rescission of Harmful Executive Orders and Actions. And this executive order essentially reverses nearly 100 of the Biden administration's previously issued executive orders on a wide range of topics, also including immigration. What it did was instructed immigration agencies on which people they should prioritize for arrest, detention, and deportation. And it also disbanded a task force which focused on the reunification of families separated at the border under Trump 1.0. So he's undoing a lot of the orders that were created to actually help and assist immigrants. And essentially he is wreaking havoc and just causing pure chaos and stirring up unnecessary fear in the immigrant communities through his executive orders. So moving on to the next one. This is declaring a national emergency at the US southern border. This executive order declares that there is a national emergency due to the invasion at the U.S. southern border. This will instruct the military to assist with the government's operations at the border, and the military will also assist in the expansion of continuing the existing border wall. Already, the Department of Defense has ordered 1,500 additional troops to the southern border. And what this does is it militarizes the border, and it sends a message that migrants are not welcome. And when in fact that is the opposite. This is a country that is supposed to welcome migrants and is supposed to extend a helping hand to those who really are in need. And when they say that they are in fear of persecution, we are not supposed to turn them away. But by sending troops down to the border, regardless of the messaging that the administration puts out and justifying, these troops being sent, it sends a message of xenophobia. It sends a message of you are not welcome here and you are not wanted. One of the ways they justify this order is by saying that the type of support the military is being sent to provide includes logistical support and services for border enforcement operations, including transportation and space for detention, as well as prioritizing the safety of DHS personnel. So they kind of sell it as a way to protect DHS personnel and handle administrative tasks and, whatever other reasons they've put out there. But essentially what they are doing is promoting fear amongst the migrants who are there on the ground and making it very difficult for anyone to seek help, regardless of whether they qualify or not. So moving on to the invasion executive orders. You have two here that you'll see on the screen. The first one on my left, called Guaranteeing the State's Protection Against Invasion, is an executive order that declares the invasion of the country across the U.S. southern border as of January 20th. On day one, he was already saying that the country was under this invasion. And the term invasion is used obviously in a negative connotation. It sends the message that migrants are coming into the U.S. armed and that they're dangerous and that they're coming to cause harm, which is so far from the truth. Obviously, we are aware that everyone who's coming through or trying to come through the U.S. southern border may not have the best intentions, but many of them are coming because they are in fear of persecution in their home countries and they're seeking safety in the United States. And that is an actual lawful right to come to the border and ask to seek asylum. And so this executive order calls for the suspension of all entry at the U.S. southern border, and anyone who is engaged in the invasion and anyone who does not provide sufficient information about their background, medical records, or criminal history will not be permitted to enter the United States. So that first ban applies regardless of whether the person is seeking asylum, and it brings entry at the southern border to a halt. They are shutting down the border as best as they can. Now, the second executive order here that's also deemed an invasion executive order is called Protecting the American People Against Invasion. And this executive order is intended to demonize and criminalize immigrants in a number of different ways, including or by the expansion of expedited removal, which I know April's going to get into a little bit more detail about expedited removals during this portion, later on in the portion of the webinar. It also includes withholding federal funding from sanctuary cities that do not cooperate with immigration agents. So when you hear people talk about, funding getting pulled on the state and local level because they're refusing to cooperate with what ICE wants them to do or what the federal government wants them to do, there are going to be repercussions for that. And that's what this executive order is allowing the federal government to do, is basically punish state and local communities for not cooperating. Also, it increases the use of 287G, which permits local police to act like immigration officers. It's giving power to other federal agencies to arrest and deport, and that includes the Drug Enforcement agencies, ATF, which is, I think, an arms, and it's the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. And basically, these agencies are now also going to have authority to step in and act as ICE officers, in addition to the already existing ICE officers who are out there arresting people without justification. And then also imposing sanctions against countries that refuse to accept deportees. So if you've been paying attention to what's happening in the news, there have already been countries who said that they're not going to cooperate. And then once they learn that President Trump is going to issue sanctions against them, suddenly they have changed their minds and said, yeah, sure, we'll accept deportees. But what's important to know is that a lot of these countries don't even have the resources or the bandwidth to accept these deportation flights. So not only is, not only are these executive orders stirring up chaos in the United States, but also now they are pushing out these problems and extending it to other countries who are not in a position to accept, arriving migrants. So this second ban, some of the other benefits that will be taken away will include TPS designations, parole programs, and work permits, and also even public benefits that they may be eligible to receive. There's a lot more information that this executive order covers, but it's too lengthy to go through all the details. But just know that litigation has already ensued against the expedited removal portion of the executive order. We'll see what happens with that. So moving on, securing our borders. This executive order focuses on steps taken to shut down the border and prevent migrants from entering the United States in a number of ways. They're going to construct a physical wall. Now, a border wall already exists, but Trump has come in and said that he continues to build on this wall and expand the wall. They are reinstating or have reinstated a program which is known as the Migrant Protection Protocols program. It's also known as Remain in Mexico. And basically, this will force asylum seekers who are coming from the U.S. southern border to remain in Mexico while they await for their immigration case to be processed. And the issue with that is that a lot of migrants are finding themselves in situations where they are subject to violence, just they're unsafe, they're in shelters where they don't feel protected. Maybe they don't have access to their counsel, they're not able to call their attorneys, they're not able to call family members. And so it's also known as an open air detention center. So while they may not be in a detention center, they are being held or forced to remain in a country until who knows how long, until their case is processed. And that could take years. If you know anything about, the immigration process and how long it can take for cases to be adjudicated, they could be in Mexico for a very long time, away from family, away from friends, which is unnecessary when a lot of them may have sponsors who are in the United States who are able to care for them. Another way is by terminating the CBP-1 mobile application. This was an application that was used by the Department of Homeland Security to get asylum seekers to make appointments through this app so that they could enter at a U.S. port of entry. On day one, the Trump administration came in and completely canceled all appointments. And those who were set to, have their appointments scheduled that day were basically left in limbo and with no other option. And then also, this executive order is ending the categorical parole programs, particularly for migrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, which is known as the CHNV parole program. So it's doing a lot of damage. And not only is the CHNV program ended, but now there are reports that the same is going to happen to parole programs for Ukraine and for Afghan immigrants as well. So Clinic is on the lookout for those memos and announcements. And as soon as they come out, we will be putting information out there to our network to share, what happens next and where do we go from there. So moving on to the next one, I'm gonna kind of fly through some of these just to move on quickly, but this one is called Protecting the Meaning and Value of American Citizenship. And this executive it orders the government agencies to stop issuing documents such as passports to children born in the United States on or after February 19th, 2025. So if you've been following again in the news, you've heard a lot of noise about birthright citizenship and what's going to happen with that. And the criteria that the administration is using is if the father was not a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident, and the mother is undocumented or has a temporary status in the United States, such as maybe she's a student or she has a non-immigrant visa where she's just here to work in the United States for a temporary period of time, the administration is saying basically that your child cannot be classified as a U.S. citizen, which is completely absurd. And a federal judge found it so absurd that he has placed a hold on the executive order. So what this executive order sets out to do is revoke citizenship from the children born in the United States, which is a violation of the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. And it has the potential to create a large class of people who will be deemed stateless and left without access to important services and identifying documents. So thankfully, on January 23rd, a federal judge, like I said, has declared this executive order blatantly unconstitutional, and he has placed a 14-day hold on the order moving forward. So as news continues to unfold about what's going to happen with this executive order, again, Clinic will be sharing that information with our networks. I'm going to bypass this one rather quickly, but basically these two executive orders are going to make it even easier for the government to detain and deport immigrants who have had interactions with terrorist groups that have been labeled terrorist groups. So even if those individuals were subject to the organization's violence, gang violence, for example, who has been labeled a terrorist organization, it doesn't matter. They are going to use that as a way to deport and demonize immigrants and send them back, to their home countries, regardless of whether they have been subjected to any harm or danger by these groups. In addition, it will make it extremely difficult for refugees and stateless people to come to the United States from countries that are identified as security risks. So this administration could possibly bring back another version of the Muslim and African travel ban, just like we saw and encountered during Trump 1.0. So again, these executive orders are linked in the PowerPoint slides. There's access to all the details that lay out the criteria for these executive orders and what exactly it means. So we'll be sharing that after the presentation. The next one is realigning the United States Refugee Admissions Program. Now, this one focuses on the suspension of the United States Refugee Admissions Program, and it puts a pause on refugees entering the country unless the government agencies make an exception. And this became effective on January 27th, 2025, and has had a significant impact already on refugees who were already approved to travel to the United States. So on day one, Trump came in, and regardless of whether those people had already made travel plans and had been approved to come to the United States, Trump has shut all of that down and basically said, everything has been come to a halt until they decide what exactly this executive order is going to look like. And, part of the issues with some of these executive orders is that we don't even know what the rollout is going to look like. It could actually take months, it could take weeks, it could take a good portion of the entire administration before they figure out how they're going to roll out some of these executive orders. But what's important to know is that during the waiting game, all of these executive orders do is just incite more fear and put out more misinformation to immigrant communities. So it's important to just stay informed and to know your rights so that you understand how these executive orders are supposed to work and how they don't work and how they potentially violate U.S. laws. So the next one here is restoring the death penalty and protecting public safety. This one is another dangerous executive order because it compels attorney generals to pursue the death penalty against undocumented immigrants for one, the murder of a law enforcement officer, and any capital crime that has been committed by an alien illegally present in the country. So it also will encourage state prosecutors, you know, on the state and local level to do the same. So this executive order holds a lot of weight, and it is quite dangerous because, again, it's a way to demonize immigrants. And, you know, we just have to be very mindful of these executive orders and you know, what they are allowed to do during the Trump administration, what they're not allowed to do. So moving on, I am near the end of, I think, the executive orders. This one is called Clarifying the Military's Role in Protecting the United States. And again, I've already talked about the militarization of, you know, using troops and sending them to the border to kind of incite fear. So this one will allow the Department of Defense to create a plan to basically seal borders. And what that means is basically they're just trying to, again, keep migrants out from coming in. So they're going to take, you know, they're going to, by any means necessary, they are going to do what they have to do to seal the borders. And the military will also be tasked with repelling forms of invasion that include unlawful mass migration, narcotics trafficking, human smuggling, and trafficking, and other criminal activities. And that is the end of the executive orders. However, I did also want to share a very recent act that was passed and signed by President Trump last week. It is called the Laken Riley Act. This has the greatest impact. The greatest impact of this act is going to be geared towards undocumented immigrants who enter the United States by crossing the border between the ports of entry. So basically, President Trump signed this act that was introduced by Congress, and it's going to expand mandatory detention to include that of non-citizens arrested for, charged with, or convicted of certain crimes, including burglary, larceny, theft, shoplifting, assaulting a police officer, and any crime that results in death or serious bodily injury. And you know, the issue with some of these crimes is that some of them may be considered misdemeanor crimes. But if you look down to the second portion of this slide here, it talks about if the value of the harm is more than $100. Now, $100 really is not that great in the grand scheme of what we're talking about, but the impact and the damage that this will do for committing a crime that amounts to that amount, or that, you know, that dollar amount, is very severe. And so this is another act that unfortunately has been signed by the president, and it potentially will have grave harm against the immigrant communities. So that brings me to the end of all the executive orders. But just before I pass it off to my colleague, Viviana Westbrook, I just want to note that helping, you know, to educate your community on their rights is an essential element of our collective response to these executive orders. Stay informed. We've heard, you know, reports in the news about the borders are making statements such as these immigrants, these migrants, they know too much. They know too much about, you know, how to stay silent, and they know their rights. So that lets us know that the work that we're doing has an impact and it's working. And so the best thing that you can do is to stay informed, stay educated, stay up to date on what's happening with these executive orders and the policies and how they affect the state and local communities. And one way you can stay informed is by signing up to our listservs, and so that you receive our emails. And this slide just gives you information on how you can contact us and a little bit more information about the executive orders. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Viviana. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Elnora. I really appreciate that. All right, so I guess it's my turn to share, and hopefully I will be successful. Okay. So everyone sees that? We're all good? You can hear me? Okay, fantastic. So I'm the state and local advocacy attorney here at Clinic, and so I work with our affiliates and the Catholic conferences across the various states and DC. And I'm going to be focusing on the protected areas because this was rescinded, you know, very early on, and it has such a huge impact on enforcement, that's happening in some very, essential places that need to be protected. Okay, that's me. That's my email. So at the end of this, I'm also going to share my slides with everyone, and you can have my email and reach out with any questions. I have a disclaimer. I just want to say that this information is meant to give general education. It's not meant as legal advice because every person, every agency, every organization is going to have a very unique set of circumstances, right? So just, I can't emphasize enough, seek legal advice, right, on what's happening, whether you're an individual or you're an organization, a faith group. You all have attorneys that want to give you advice, and you should be in consultation with them. Also, make sure you are looking at the specifics of your state, your locality, your county, because again, even as we heard at the beginning of this call, different people are doing different things, across the country. So you just want to know what's happening in your community and make sure that you are giving out accurate information. And to reiterate what Elnora said, be informed. Information is changing very quickly, so make sure that you are getting correct information, and definitely sign up for our newsletters to keep up with everything. Okay, so the protected areas policy, very quickly, 2011, it started out as the sensitive locations policy. And it's basically a memorandum that the Department of Homeland Security sent around to ICE and CBP about enforcement. And they were saying, hey, let's limit arrests, surveillance, all the activities that we're doing in these particular areas. And they said, we're including schools, hospitals, churches, buildings for religious services, things like that. So they're like, yeah, so try to limit it. Okay. Then in 2021, it was expanded and it became the protected areas. And the reason they changed the name is that they thought that sensitive locations just didn't encompass how important these areas are and how they need to be protected. So they wanted to also be more inclusive. And so this was something that clinic that we engaged on to be able to see this expanded. It wasn't expanded to courts, sadly, but it was expanded. It was expanded to some other areas such as not just medical, but like mental health care. And also, where social services like food pantries, domestic violence shelters, homeless shelters, places where immigrants are getting, disaster emergency relief. So think of like Florida storms, hurricanes, California wildfires, shootings. If they're happening, people should be able to go to their children and not be worried that ICE is going to be there. Like when the Uvalde shooting happened, there were a lot of CBP officers there, and that was really, terrifying for immigrant families. Okay, so, and it also expanded it to just not only encompass the area, but anything that's near that could still have the same chilling effect. Because basically they're like, these are essential services, people need to get to them, and, we recognize that. Now, both of them had had a myriad of exceptions. ICE could still conduct enforcement in this, with like very big things like national security threat, imminent risk of death, violence, physical harm, the hot pursuit. So the hot pursuit is very interesting because, as I'm going to say right in the next slide, unfortunately, this policy got rescinded like the first, second day. And unfortunately, a lot of the wording and framing around this was, oh, we want to stop, immigrants who are criminals from running into churches and hiding out there. And that clearly, that was not happening because there was a very clear exception, in both policies that said, hot pursuit, people could still go in there. ICE agents could still go in and CBP. So, I think pushing back on that narrative is important because honestly, at the end of the day, I feel like they rescinded it just to do as much harm, in the very vulnerable areas as possible, which is really terrible. So, January 20th, 2025, DHS issued a directive and they rescinded the protected areas policy. Good thing is, we've already seen a lawsuit filed, and it was filed by the Quakers, which is fantastic. And they're claiming that basically they're violating their right to practice religion, which is, which is really good. We're hoping, we've heard rumors, rumblings that there are going to be more suits filed on this, so we'll wait and see. And I did have this one quote, and this quote was from the Catholic Health Association, and it was like by a group of Catholic leaders, and one of them is Bishop Seitz, and he's one of our board members, and he does a lot of great work. And so they said, turning places of care, healing, and solace into places of fear and uncertainty for those in need, while endangering the trust between pastors, providers, educators, and the people they serve, will not make our communities safer. Okay, so keeping protected areas safe despite the rescission of the memo. Okay, so I don't mean to go over some of the things that were said before, but I do want to say, just because they're gone doesn't mean that, all hope is lost, that there aren't ways to protect immigrants in these areas. So the Fourth Amendment, that still provides the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. And, it's been found like to grant a reasonable expectation of privacy. So there's going to be a lot of finagling with organizations, with different groups about what's public versus private. And I think, that's going to be the main takeaway, how to make a space that you are offering, whether it's employment or a place of worship, a school, a court, to be private instead of public, to have areas that are private and where you can, protect immigrants, there, and, have policies in place to attend to ICE officers in the public areas. Because, if it's a public area, anyone can come in. So as was stated, ICE has to either have a judicial warrant or the consent, and this is for employers, like of employer, to enter the non-public areas of the property. And let's see what else. I put, okay, so this is an arrest warrant and also a warrant of removal. The arrest warrant on the left side, this is something that has to be, this is a judicial warrant. So it has to be signed by a judge or, magistrate, justice of the peace. It has to be from the judicial system. They have to be there. But, a lot of times ICE will show up and they'll have an ICE warrant of arrest and it looks so official. It's signed. They've got, a whole bunch of information on it. And people just don't know. And so they'll, turn over the person, the individual, or the information. And it's really important that people understand that no, it has to be signed, judge, magistrate, and it has to have a detailed description. Like they have to say who they're looking for or what they're looking for, the location they're searching. And, if people, are there, like if people show up to the door, if agents come, then, and they don't have a valid warrant, then everyone has the right to say, this is not a valid warrant. You may not enter, please leave. And again, this is like, yeah, public versus private, but if they have a valid arrest warrant, then that's a different, case. And we have some information on there about what to do. But again, warrant of removal, deportation on the right-hand side, and this is administrative. And so this is the thing that you could just be like, no, this is not sufficient. And basically across the board, we are telling, schools and hospitals and employers, everyone, right? Like make sure that they have a warrant. Make sure you have someone who is trained to know what the warrant is. And that might be like the best option might be, have an attorney who can review what is being asked. Because if you disclose information you are not supposed to, especially hospitals and schools, they're gonna be in trouble. So you want to make sure that that's not happening. Okay. So, let's see how to protect those areas. So this is places of employment. So again, talking about public, private, you want to make sure you have that one person who's the person that you go to, and also really important that you also have everyone trained so that they understand, like all your staff knows who the go-to is, and they understand that in the meantime, they have to say something like, oh, yes, I cannot give you, per our protocol, I cannot give you access to our private, spaces, but you are, welcome to sit here. I'm going to, reach out to the designated staff member who will talk to you shortly. And then, but whatever they do, like make sure they do not give them permission to enter. And you want to practice this because sometimes in the heat of the moment when you're talking to ICE, you get really nervous, you get tongue-tied, and then you just say something that can be construed as giving them permission. So you want to make sure that everyone is on the same page and ready to interact with ICE. Okay, so I put here some of the things about ICE in the workplace, and this is the National Immigrant Law Center resource, and they are great. They have a lot of really great resources, especially on labor and labor immigrant rights, and also in hospitals. So definitely check them out. But I included one of those. Okay, so here's some more detailed information on healthcare. HIPAA also is going to apply here. So, if someone's including immigration status and combining it with other identifying information, that's a really big, and they're disclosing that, like that's a big issue. That's going to be a violation. And of course, just make sure that people are aware that if you violate HIPAA, like there are consequences. There's both civil and also criminal charges that can be brought. So it's something to just, make sure that in case people are reluctant in any spaces about doing XYZ, sometimes it just be like, no, you're just covering yourself. Like this is, yes, it is the right thing to do, of course, 100%. But also you want to do it to make sure that, if you're a healthcare facility, that you are covering your own protection. Okay, so, and they should avoid collecting immigration status information. They should redact, like if this is a warrant for specific information, a judicial warrant, then make sure that you redact anything that is unnecessary and that you are only providing what is being asked. Okay, courthouses. So just flagging that there are several places in the US that actually allow courthouses to be protected. So anyone going to their state courthouses, they don't have to worry about getting picked up by ICE, by immigration enforcement, unless they have a judicial warrant. But the really nice thing about, like in Oregon and in New York, they both have stipulations that say it not only protects people who are in the courthouses, but also when traveling to and from courthouses. So that's really amazing. And Maryland should do that too. Let's see, rights in school. Okay, so these were all mentioned before, FERPA, and again, like schools, they can request, for documentation of does this child live in the school district, but they cannot, under any circumstance, ask about citizenship or immigration status when trying to register. Plyler v. Doe, oops, that's a typo, it's Doe, there's no S. Doe is a 1982 Supreme Court case. It granted the right to free education, K through 12, regardless of immigration status. We know that there are several cases, several bills that have been, presented this legislative session, and they might be trying to overturn Plyler with some of these. We'll see what happens. I mean, yeah, but we are definitely, for now, they have the right, and that is really important. Okay. So these are just some other things about schools, what to do, adopt rules that make it clear that the school doesn't inquire, designate the official, same thing, don't collect immigration status. And then there's a little link to having school board resolutions. So the more information that you have that shows that you are a welcoming school, the better. I did put this as an example. This is like the Indianapolis Public Schools, and they have a great website that's all about resources and support for undocumented students and families, and they have lots of language around welcoming. They have everything translated into 15 languages. They have like frequently asked questions like, can ICE agents come to the school? And they're like, no, not without a judicial warrant. And IPS staff are trained to handle such situations. And this is the kind of reassurance that you want to be giving your immigrant community so that they understand. Okay, so that was pretty much it. And so the same thing applies to, places of worship and, like anything that's private, you just have the right to ask for that judicial warrant. And, if they don't produce it, then don't let them in. And of course there'll be like some rare exceptions if there is some immediate threat that is, rises to the level. But that is pretty much everything from me. So I will stop sharing and
Thank
pass
you
it on.
so much, Viviana. And in 1 minute, Viviana, before you go, that designated person that businesses should identify in cases of enforcement, can they be virtual or must they be in that premises? And secondly, there was an update last week. Can you just speak to that regarding ICE authority now expand to immigration courts? Do you have any updates or response to those two issues or questions?
Okay, so for the first one, I will say that I would have someone in person because they are going to want to be able to see the warrant, and to be able to see like, okay, is this, is this the good information? Does this all have, everything that we need in a judicial warrant? And also sometimes just having someone present, can be impactful and powerful because if you don't have someone present, you want to make sure you have someone who can, record also, that's recording everything that ICE does. Because if ICE does have a valid warrant, and especially in schools, where you have to bring in a whole bunch of other people, like you want to make sure that, anything that is allowed, that it's being recorded, that you're ensuring they're not exceeding their limits within the judicial warrant, because, a lot of times they do, they'll just try to get as much information as they can, or they'll, take things that they're not supposed to. Or for instance, let's say you're in a hospital, right? And if you have like you have something on your desk and it's just face up, they can look at it because it's in, like, especially if they're in the public space, of the hospital, like a waiting room. If they see it, they can look at it and be like, oh, cool. Like I just found out some information. But if they pick up the next sheet, they're not allowed to do that by law. Like they can only see what's in plain view. But if you don't know that, you can't stop them, and you won't see that if you're not, there, if you don't have someone physically present. So that's why it's really important to have someone trained. You can have your attorney can be virtual. If you have an attorney, like I would say they can be virtual, but I think that every place should have someone there who can, directly talk to the agents. What was the second question? I'm sorry.
Is ICE can ICE now arrest folks in immigration courts?
I haven't heard of that happening yet, but I'll defer to see if Elnora or April have more to say on that. Yeah.
Thank you, Viviana. Thank you so much. Please hold your questions. There will be Q&A. April, we turn it over to you.
All right. My name is April Holloway, and let's get directly into the stuff that you came here for. So I will start off by just explaining what the difference is between removal and expedited removal. Can you see my screen, Ben? Can you let me know? You got it? Perfect. All right. So when you enter the United States without permission, what some people refer to as illegal, I don't use that word, or if you're in the United States and you overstay your visa, or if you violate your visa in some way, those are not criminal actions. Those are civil actions that have civil penalties. What that means is that you might end up in immigration court, and that is called removal proceedings. Okay, that is not a criminal issue. So removal proceedings is the typical process where a person goes to immigration court and they're able to apply for some relief to allow them to remain in the United States. Expedited removal is different. It's not a judicial process. You're going in front of an officer who's making a decision about you. And there's a few other differences too. Okay. So the first difference is going to be you don't have an opportunity for bail or bond before you go into proving your right to remain into the United States. If you're in regular removal proceedings, regular immigration proceedings, you would have an opportunity to be released and then be able to present the best case possible in a few months down the road, sometimes a few years down the road. If you're in expedited removal proceedings, you are going to have to stay detained while you prove your right to stay. Opportunities to have a lawyer are very different if you're in removal versus expedited removal proceedings. Obviously, if you're detained, you have less resources and you're not going to always be able to afford a lawyer. And one is not provided to you in civil proceedings. These are civil, not criminal. Okay. And then the last thing is you're in front of an asylum officer, or you're in front of a USCIS officer when you're in expedited removal. You're in front of a regular judge when you're in removal proceedings. So those things are different. I need to back up a little bit because I realized I forgot to explain how does one end up in expedited removal proceedings. So previously, expedited removal was for people who were found in the United States within 100 miles from the border, and they could not prove that they'd been in the United States more than 2 weeks. This has been changed over time. What we're looking at right now is an expansion of expedited removal to if you're anywhere in the United States and you can't prove that you've been in the US for more than 2 years, you might be placed in expedited removal proceedings. So that's why it's important. Okay. So if you don't have proof that you've been in the US for more than 2 years, okay, anywhere in the United States, you might be subject to being placed in expedited removal where you don't have as much opportunity to prove your right to remain in the United States. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is if you're in expedited removal, you basically only have one thing that you can do to stay in the US, and that's to prove who can be placed in expedited removal. Okay. Yeah. That's to prove that you have some fear of returning to your home country that meets the level of persecution required for asylum, or that you're going to be tortured if you return to your home country. The way this is measured is by doing a credible fear interview or a reasonable fear interview. And that's conducted by an asylum officer. And the problem that happens with a lot of people who end up in expedited removal is that you don't know what the asylum requirements are. And so you might actually have a situation that meets the requirements, but because you don't know what it is and there's no one to guide you and tell you what it means, then sometimes you don't express yourself the best way. Or they say that you don't express yourself consistently and say that you're not credible. Whereas if you're in removal proceedings, then you can do more than just file for asylum. You can also file for cancellation of removal. You can also ask that you be considered for VAWA cancellation. So there's not as many opportunities to stay in the US if you get placed in expedited removal. So I just very briefly want to go over what the asylum requirements are in the event that you end up in a credible fear interview. So the first one is that you have to prove that you've been persecuted in the past. So that's called past persecution in your home country. Persecution is going to include things like death threats, being violated sexually. I don't know when we place it on YouTube if that's going to be a problem for me to say that or not. Or if you're threatened, a serious threat of death where a person can actually carry that out. So past persecution is not going to include general crime in your home country or attempts to recruit you into a gang. It has to be direct and specific towards you, that past persecution. The next one is going to be a fear of future persecution. So if that person who previously threatened you is still in the home country, they could still harm you, then there is an objective and subjective fear that if you return, you're going to be harmed again. The third one is the actual most tricky part of the whole meeting the elements of asylum. And that is the reason why you were harmed in the past and the reason why you would be harmed in the future has to be because of something specific about you. It has to be because of your specific political beliefs or expression, your religious beliefs or expression, your family, ethnicity, clan membership. Again, not general crime, but something specific about your person that is particular and immutable. It cannot be changed, okay? Or nor should it have to be changed. So this is also going to include people who are members of the LGBTQ family as well. And then the next one, the fourth, is that it's not possible for you to be safe and internally relocate to another part of your country. So that means that the fear, the danger, the persecution that you faced has to exist across the entire country, not just in your city or your province, okay? And the last one is that the government is unwilling or unable to protect you. And you can show that by the fact that maybe you filed a police report and there was no response to it, or perhaps the government actors are the ones who are persecuting you, or maybe you have articles to show where other people did complain about this thing and they were retaliated against, or they were offered no help. So those are the things that you have to be able to show to get past a credible fear interview. And if you do get past a credible fear or reasonable fear interview, then you are able to be placed into regular removal proceedings, enter the United States. You have an opportunity for bond. You have an opportunity to put together an even stronger case for asylum before you go in front of the judge. One little loophole that a lot of people don't realize is if you are found to have a negative credible fear or reasonable fear interview, you can request for that decision to be reviewed by a judge. You have to make the request affirmatively. No one will do it for you. Okay? There's nobody on the government side that's going to do it for you. You have to affirmatively request for that decision to be reviewed before a judge. And the last thing that I want to talk about was overall deportation protection. And this relates to, well, the first thing I'm going to say is counterintuitive. And then the second part is going to relate to the Lake and Riley Act that was discussed by the Catholic Charities attorney earlier. So if you get picked up for some minor infraction and you know that it's going to take a while to adjudicate it, that means to get a decision on it, it is better for you to stay in jail. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that. I know you don't want to hear it. You want to get out of the criminal jail, the state court, the state jail, the county jail. But if you go into immigration proceedings with an unresolved offense, it will be taken as you are guilty of that offense. You will not have an opportunity in immigration court to challenge what you have been charged with. So it's better for you to get a disposition on that charge before you come into immigration custody. And this is the reason why the Lake and Riley Act is so dangerous, because you can be accused of something that you are legitimately not guilty of and then removed from the United States without any further due process because there's no disposition made on that case, but then you go into immigration custody and you're deported just because of the charge. And this happens a lot. This happens to a lot of people all the time. And it's one thing that I do find that frustrates me dealing with the community is because a lot of people will say, yes, I'm an immigrant, but I agree with the Lake and Riley Act because you think it couldn't possibly happen to you. You think it's not possible that you would be caught up in a situation where somebody in the car has marijuana, but it's not you, but you get picked up and charged. It can happen. It can happen. And everyone deserves an opportunity to go through their criminal proceedings before they're taken to be guilty in immigration custody. And so that's what I wanted to say about that. Overall deportation protection, if you are a person who is currently pending a process, you're in the United States and your VAWA's pending, you're in the US and your asylum's pending, then you want to avoid interactions with law enforcement. Obviously, you don't want to get into any trouble. But you also want to do two other things. Email yourself photocopies of your documents so that you always have access to them no matter where you are, and then email them to a trusted friend so that if you do get detained by immigration, you have someone who has access to your documents, and when they go to an attorney for assistance, they'll be able to show them, here's what's going on. One of the issues that I have is somebody wants to come to me on behalf of a friend or a family member, and they don't know anything about that person's case. So you want to make sure you have someone who's designated to have a copy of your documents and know what's going on in your case. And the other thing that I want to say is if you are a mixed status family, meaning that you are adult who's undocumented and you have children who are citizens, you need to make a plan of what you want to happen in the event that you are detained. What's the plan for who's going to be the guardian for those children? And if you are deported, who is the person who's going to keep those children? Or do you want them to go with you to whatever country you're going to? And if you want them to go with you, you need to put enough money aside for arrange for their transportation, make sure they have their passports, and things like that. There was a question asked earlier that I also want to answer about whether you can be arrested in immigration proceedings. The long-standing answer has been no. However, I was in court today and I asked the officers, what instructions have you all been given about what to do if ICE comes in? And he said that they had a meeting scheduled, and in the meeting that they weren't given any direct instruction to allow ICE or not allow ICE. However, one HSI officer had come the day before, and they were told the day before that he was coming, and he just picked up the person and left. So I'm under the impression that the attorney knew that that was going to happen, based on the way that he described it. So just check with your attorney before you go into court. In the event that you have like an outstanding warrant, that would be the situation that happened here. If you have an outstanding warrant and you're needing to go to immigration court, then check with your attorney. You obviously want to go to court, don't make your situation worse, but have a plan for what you're going to do afterwards. Okay, and I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see if I have any questions. Maybe I will.
Couple of questions. So for the expedited removal, being able to prove in the US for 2 years, is it advisable for folks to carry like information about like utility, ID, transcript if they're international student? What types of information can I put on myself in such an instance?
Absolutely. All of those things that you just said can be used to prove that you've been in the US for over 2 years. You can also think of medical records, receipts, utility bills, school transcripts, any mail that you receive that's from a government agency that has your address on it is going to have a postage date. And so any of that can be used to show that you've been in the US for over 2 years.
Someone wants to know, like, if I have a pending asylum case, should I be worried at this time?
My response to that is only if you have some interaction with law enforcement. You know, if you're driving without a license and you get pulled over, you know, that could turn into a much bigger situation. So I would avoid having any interactions with law enforcement while you're waiting for your asylum interview to be scheduled. And anybody can disagree with me, Viviana, or I can't see your colleague right this moment, the name on my screen, but I'm sure that different attorneys are probably giving a little bit different advice. I'm a little bit more on the conservative side. I've actually recommended that people right now avoid flying, avoid doing anything that's going to put them at risk of coming into contact with any law enforcement.
I will just add one comment to that. You know, I've seen reports floating around, and it's hard to verify what's true and what's not with all the information that's coming in. But I have seen reports where we're hearing that ICE is picking up people who have pending immigration cases, you know, with USCIS, for example. And, you know, they have valid EAD cards, they have valid work authorization cards. And I think I saw one today and you know, during my work hours that said, oh, ICE picked up someone and then told the individual that, oh, your EAD card is a fake, it's fraud. So this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with, these ICE agents are just real human beings. And regardless of what the directive may be from, their superiors or supervisors, they go out and do whatever they want. They're inciting fear, and there's really no way in that moment, if you're on the receiving end of encountering an ICE agent, you don't want to combat that with, you don't want to be combative with the agent. You kind of just want to comply in that moment. And of course, if you're just afraid, you're scared, you don't know what to do, you end up just kind of succumbing to, what happens in that moment, whether it's justified or not. So it's hard to say whether, if you have a valid asylum claim or some other pending immigration case with USCIS, whether or not you won't be picked up unjustifiably or not. The truth is, I think we may start to see and hear more cases of that happening. And I don't know if Viviana has heard anything on the state and local end, but it's important to just be aware that potentially could happen.
Yeah, no, I just second everything that's been said. In April, to your point about being very careful about not interacting with law enforcement, trying to do as little to call attention. And that's really hard sometimes in certain localities, especially when we know that certain people are doing racial profiling and other things. So it's so important, especially if you are know where you're driving through. So if there's 287G County or other places that just don't have very welcoming policies, if you can go around or go somewhere else, maybe that's a better idea. Take a longer trip. It could be scenic, it could be nicer. But it's important because we do hear so many stories about just basic interactions with law enforcement, where in states that don't provide driver's license to immigrants, undocumented immigrants, then they get stopped, they get put to they're taken to the jail, and then 287G just activates, and all of a sudden you're in detention for all this time and are separated from your community, your loved ones, your work, just because of one little thing. You were driving without a license because your state doesn't provide it because they don't want to, but you need to make a living. So, it's unfair, but yeah, definitely be very, very cautious.
What power does U visa have over deportation? Because I have asylum cases pending, waiting for court schedule, and was assaulted by armed robbery recently. So previously, if you were in immigration court, a judge could have your case terminated while you wait for U visas to process. I think that they still have, if the government agrees, the authority to do that. I know that some people have been in court recently and been told that the government's not agreeing to anything. That has not been my experience so far. I was in court today, and the government immediately offered relief before we even started. And then last week, I was with an attorney I was with a government attorney who, after my direct examination, conceded that the person was eligible for asylum. So I haven't personally seen any difference in the way that the government attorneys are acting with regards to cases being terminated or approved. So I'm sorry, I got so far away from your answer. It's possible that you could still have, if you're in removal proceedings, your case dismissed or terminated to wait for your U visa to process. Can ICE break your door if you refuse to open your door or pretend that you're not available? Elnora or Viviana want to answer?
I'll let Viviana answer. I know she can add a lot to this, but I will say no. ICE is going to come to your house and they are going to assert themselves as though they have a valid judicial warrant. And I would say more likely than not, the warrant that they may be, showing you or waving in front of you is going to be an administrative warrant. So ICE doesn't have the the authority to come and bang down your door. Now, if they have a valid judicial warrant, right, signed by a judge, an arrest warrant that they are seeking, those are the warrants where you see that, yeah, they have the right to come and essentially say, hey, we're here looking for this person. And, I don't know whatever strategies they're going to use to try and enter the home, but potentially they have the right to enter it with a judicial warrant. Now, if it's just, like I said, if it's just an administrative warrant signed by, for example, an ICE, administrative person, they don't have the right to enter. And that's why it's really important that no matter what, you do not open that door. And anyone inside the home does not open a door to an ICE agent who is looking for someone or searching for someone. Viviana, I don't know if you want to add anything else to that.
Oh, sure. So, I think that okay, so let's first talk about what they can do, what they're supposed to be doing, and what they actually end up doing, because sometimes they are two very different things. So, if you choose to not open that door, pretend you're not available, obviously, like, you are putting yourself and you're putting the people in your household at risk. So, as Elnora said, like, most of the time it's going to be an administrative warrant that they have. I would say 9 times out of 10, because they don't want to do the work. They don't want to get the judicial warrant. They won't have it most of the time, which is why it's so important to just assert your rights. And it's just better to just, say you're not going to open the door, like, ask them straight up. Like, they are not supposed to lie to you. They can lie to you about many things, but they're not supposed to lie to you if you ask them point blank, do you have a judicial warrant? Like, is this signed by a judge? And if they lie about that, that's going to be an issue. But make sure that you remember that and take that down. But, make sure that, if they have a judicial warrant, have them, push it up to the window, slide it under the door, but don't open the door, as Elnora said, because the moment you crack that open, they take that as an invitation and they just storm through. But if they have a valid judicial warrant for a person, it's a valid arrest warrant and it has a person's information, has a valid address, that is the address where they are at that moment, and everything matches up, and they know that, like, maybe they saw the person go in, they have probable cause to believe that they are there, then the best course of action, and this is really heartbreaking because you hate telling people this, but it might be to send out the person who they have the judicial arrest warrant for. Because if not, they're going to come in, and then once they're there, they're going to start taking everyone that they see, asking people for, their status, and, instead of having one arrest, it could be many. So sometimes it's a very difficult choice. And again, like, stick to your guns about the judicial warrant, make sure that it is a judicial warrant, but it's a challenging situation.
At a different Know Your Rights information session, we were informed to not share anything with ICE or police officers or anyone about your immigration status or country of origin or length of time in the US, even if you have a valid document like EAD, green card, etc., that you have on your person. Would you agree to this advice, or would you have different advice? It sounds like the person was telling you to exercise your right to remain silent, which is a good idea. So if you are the person, you're presented with a warrant, it's not a judicial warrant, I'm exercising my right to remain silent. Does that mean that they're going to go away and leave you alone? No. It just means that you're not going to possibly say something that might incriminate yourself or make your situation worse.
And I guess I would say, because I was talking to someone about this earlier today from Amica Center, and they do a lot of work with detained individuals, and they were talking about, how sometimes, though, like, especially, like, let's say you're in a work raid or some other place where a lot of people are getting rounded up, and because of expedited removal, you don't want to be sucked into that. Like, if you have something that shows you're here, like, I think it's going to have to be like a very case by case basis, because if you don't want to get sucked into that, if you want to, right now, it's like it's no man's land out there. But I think that, again, go to an immigration attorney, get the legal advice, like, talk about all the specifics because I think, as a overall, policy, like, right to remain silent, great thing to exercise. Be like, I want to have an attorney. I want to go talk to my attorney. I'm not going to sign anything without my attorney reviewing. Like all these things are great, and should be employed. But also sometimes you might want to just whip out okay, here's my 2-year lease, blah, blah, whatever shows I was here from, or 4-year lease and I've been here for like 5 years, whatever. And, but it'll depend. So again, like talk to an immigration attorney.
Right. Should international students be traveling to Canada on F1 or OPT? I've already stated my position as the most conservative person here, probably. I don't think you should be traveling at all. Feel free to disagree with me, Elnora, Viviana.
I have nothing to add.
Okay. Separately, is there a way to determine if it is a valid judge's signature? There is no place for a judge's signature on the warrants that they typically have because they're not judicial warrants.
So if it's a judicial warrant, it should potentially be assumed that if there is a signature, it is a valid signature.
Yeah,
I
well,
would,
I think
Viviana, you can disagree. I would say yes, because I don't think they would fake a judge's signature.
Yeah, I think that'd be a whole other can that they would not want to open. I think that more than anything, just make sure that it's because they're going to sign yes. You're not going to know what the judge's signature says, but they're going to have like the title, and the judge. It's going to be like, Judge so and so, Magistrate so and so. With the ICE warrant, like it's going to say like Officer blah blah blah. Like it's going to show that it's ICE. So I think it's important to. Like if you don't see something that's indicating that's a judge or magistrate, like just be like, and again, like ask them, like try to cover all your bases. And something that I've had landlords ask me, how can I support immigrants? And what I tell them is show up, be the person that can interact with ICE. Show up and be like, let me see that, like have them train themselves and maybe have an attorney or someone on standby to just review, these when they come in, like, hey, is this a judicial warrant or is this an immigration order? Like, what do I do? But I think it's really important to have someone ready to do it. But it's not like they're gonna sit there and be like, yes, Judge so and so's signature it matches perfect. Like I think that would be really hard too.
Does USCIS share information on pending cases, EAD, or permanent residence cases with ICE? So if USCIS issues a decision, for example, this is what I think you're asking. If they issue a decision saying your spousal visa is not approved and you have 30 days to either file a motion to reopen or you need to leave the US, do they share that with ICE? Yes. Not sure if that's your question. Anybody else? No?
And in that case, is that grounds for expedited removal, or these are two separate different things?
That would depend on the time that you've been in the United States, whether you go into regular removal proceedings or expedited removal. The time that it takes to process most spousal visas, you're in regular removal. What if your name is misspelled or not your full name on the warrant? Is that still valid?
It is, as long as the underlying basis for who they're arresting, why they're arresting, like is still valid. Like, because of course people, especially with immigrants, like make mistakes with names all the time. And, basically as long as it's the same person, but if it's an entirely different person, then it's no longer valid.
Right. I think, so we already answered the next two. Besides sharing information as this, what other key roles can religious, social, and community groups play to protect our citizens?
So I think there's so many things and I have a whole other presentation for allies and what allies can do, but I think there's so much, right? Like state and local, like legislation, supporting legislation, um, you know, if you have money, donate it to all these wonderful organizations doing the work. If hey, buy a whole bunch of red cards, the ILRC red cards, and distribute them, get them in different languages. Um, any way that you can, again, like having policies that protect, and make sure that you have those policies in place, and that you just push like if you're part of a church, if you're part of a group, just be like, hey, so if an immigrant, if we have a lot of immigrants who come here, and what happens when ICE shows up, like just push people to have, these policies, write op-eds, and help immigrants write op-eds also. Again, keeping in mind if it's safe for them, depending on their status, but we want to hear from directly impacted individuals. We want their voices to be elevated. And, sometimes, you know, they might not have the status to be able to actually do that. But, whatever you can do to raise the issues, to bring it to your community, local papers, just really important to, make sure that we're getting our narrative out there, because of course we've seen so much, awful narrative and so much dehumanizing and criminalizing, and we need to be fighting back on that.
I quickly want to add to that as well. Let me come to camera. Other things that other organizations can do include to be more civically engaged. Whether if your organization has the power, one second. If your organization has the power to actually lead congressional or even council level, county level testimonials and hearings, and going to testify as a community leader, as a faith leader, as a nonprofit leader, is very powerful. Sometimes even if you represent or serve immigrant populations, they can write their testimonies and you can read it on their behalf if they have fear of exposing their immigration status. So organizations like Nigerian Center will go to these places to testify. You can send us your testimonies and we can read it on your behalf. So many nonprofits now, so many cultural groups now have what is called Immigration Deportation Fund that's actually doing defense work. You can contribute, you can help fundraise towards that. Our Nigerian Center has Immigration Assistance Fund. We are primarily funded by the DC government. We have a small fee that those who are outside of this area have to pay to get services from us. I want to shout out organizations like Jesus House DC in Montgomery County sends us check every single month, and that helps support the residents of Maryland. So you can do things like that as well. Third thing that you can do as a community leader and one attorney and the district attorney's office actually share this, one of the Know Your Rights. So just as you would write impact statement to say somebody's a criminal, you don't want them in your community, the opposite is also true. The community can actually write statement to say this person is an asset to our community. We want them to come back and not to be deported. You can actually mobilize the community and show up in the removal proceeding hearing in court and show physical presence to show that they have that community behind them. When they're going through their petitioning and adjudication for their cases, you can write support letters, to support them as well. Those are the things that come to mind, what the role organizations can do.
Good evening. I'm about to file my adjustment of status. Given the possibility of further delays in processing, I'm concerned about the potential impact of having overstayed my visa by more than 6 months prior to filing. Could this overstay negatively affect my case during the interview or final decision process? Additionally, are there any mitigating factors or steps I can take to address this issue during the adjustment process? If you're adjusting by marriage to a U.S. citizen, you will be forgiven for the overstay. No, there's nothing you could do to mitigate it at this point. Anybody else? All right. I have a case of domestic violence in court since May, and I left my spouse in December to a different state, but we still talk. I need to file my removal of condition green card. What's the risk if I file alone? should I file with him since we're not divorced yet? If you're not living together as a married couple, then you are not able to file jointly. You will have to request the waiver and you'll have to look at the conditions as to which the waiver can be granted for to see if you meet one of those requirements. Anybody else? Okay. Deportation carries shame and stigma. How can home countries help? I know that when people get deported, they're often arriving without any resources. So if you're able to provide resources for people, a telephone, a change of clothes so they can get to their home city, that would be very helpful. Also, initiatives to help people reintegrate into employment and housing. Anybody else?
Yeah, and I'll say one of the things that we have some emergency, like rapid response, a toolkit for the 50 states, DC, and one of the things that we have there is consular information. So, your local embassy, like talking ahead of time. And of course, this depends on what your situation is, because if you're someone who's seeking asylum and you're saying you can't avail yourself of governmental protections, it becomes very iffy. But, I think that it's good to have, conversations with your embassy, your local consulate, if you think that there might be any issues.
I do have one more question before we close out. So in a normal non-immigration case, I think the judge or the court system will look at the totality of the process, even on behalf of the government, how they went about, prosecuting that case. Does that apply to immigration? Say the way they came to the house was not proper, they flashed something which is not their type of warrant, and that person is deported. Can they come back to the state? How should they go about telling that story that they didn't go through the proper procedure? And does that apply to them?
No. I mean, there are some exceptions where the government has done something wrong and we're able to bring somebody back to the United States, but the ones that I'm thinking of do not have to do with the way that ICE detained them. I'm open to being wrong.
I know somebody's praying that you are wrong. So they're saying, oh, Viviana, Elnora, please disagree. I know my brother is in this country. Heise didn't do a good job the way they got them overseas. But I know some nonprofit like, who actually was able to get some folks back into the country. I don't know the totality of those cases. In what case would that apply that?
The ones I'm thinking of are like somebody on appeal, like their case was on appeal and they were moved during that appeal period improperly. And then when the BIA issues a decision on the appeal, they're able to come back to the US. Those are the situations I'm thinking of that they have nothing to do with the way that they were detained.
I think there, and I could be completely misrepresenting, but I think I've definitely heard, especially with raids, that there are certain things that can be done, but I don't know them off the top of my head. Like I probably either refer people to like IDP, the Immigrant Defense Project, or NIP, NLG, because they're the ones that do an awful lot of this type of work. So they'll probably have some resource on their website. And I'll say NIP, NLG did a training that was like several hours long, and I think it's available on their website. And I think they might have covered something on this, but.
Okay. At this moment, can we all give a virtual round, a resounding applause for our outstanding legal experts for the wealth of information, as well as our elected officials and all the resource persons here. Thank you so much. And before you go, please give me 1 minute, everyone. For those who join at a later time, I just quickly want to talk about Nigerian Center one more time, particularly our upcoming events. If you want to learn more about the work of the Nigerian Center, this Saturday at 1 p.m., we have a virtual meeting called Introduction to Nigerian Center's Work. and also our strategy for 2025, please go to the website on the events and sign up for that event. We'd really love to share more and welcome you to a part of our community. If you are in the Washington, D.C. metro area, we do offer free walk-in service in Washington, D.C. There is no cost to you to avail yourself of that service. Even if you have an attorney and you want to get a second opinion, you are welcome to come. If you're not in the area, there's a small fee. You can still access that service virtually.
But how can we access that, Mr. Gbenga? Because I sent you a question, you didn't reply.
Could you please hold your comment? I'm going to make a note of your name and I will follow up with you right after. Thank you very much. If you want to access the virtual service, go to the website under immigration. On that page, scroll to the bottom. It's going to say virtual consultation. And if a Nigerian member team is online, if you can please help me chat in the chat box, nigeriancenter.org/virtual consultation. That will be the form that you're going to fill out. nigeriancenter.org/virtual consultation. I don't have access to all the questions that is coming through this call. How do you get involved? If you go to the website, nigeriancenter.org/serve, we have volunteer opportunities. Please reach out to us. And back to the question, how can community also help? You can also volunteer at an organization like ours. We have a community partner network that is free to join. It's just a short form that you can fill, whether you're a church, mosque, synagogue, media, academia, business. We regularly connect with our community partners to get resources like this out. If you're not following us on social media, please join us on the social media platforms. I should also echo, we have a playlist on YouTube called Know Your Rights, and it spans the categories, pathways for humanitarian-based immigration, family-based immigration, employment-based immigration, work authorization, asylum, minors, special juvenile visas, VAWA, all of that resource is on our YouTube page. Please avail yourself. One way to support us is please consider your donation to the Nigerian Center. We need your help at this particular times. We are 501c3. Your donation are tax deductible. nigeriancenter.org/donate. We do have an immigration assistance fund. We desperately need to expand our services beyond the DMV area and to also do more representation in addition to partial representation that we currently do. We need your support for this work. That said, I want to thank every single one, and this is my fun part. I say we are all released into greatness, and stay tuned. You will be receiving the recording as well as the presentation for tonight's event. Bye, everyone, for now.
Good night. Thank you.